person selling a business, that same type of a deal. I mean, those people need to hear and understand that God is not done with you yet. In fact, the greatest work could just be beginning right now.
Have I done enough? That's the question that we are going to tackle on today's show. Hey everybody, Jared Sebesta here, co-host of Retire Repurposed. Well, on behalf of Ben Taatjes and myself, we are so glad that you are joining us here today. We always say it's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Have you ever tried to rethink retirement? Rethink what that means, and more specifically, what does that mean for you? Because retirement is really a fairly new concept. It's arguably only about 60 years old, dating back to about the mid-1900s. It's certainly no older than 100 years old. Think back to 100 years ago. What did retirement mean back then? Retirement meant that you were getting older, that you were getting tired. Nobody wanted to retire. Retirement wasn't something people strived for 100 years ago. People that were hardworking and farmers and working with their hands never wanted to get to a point where they had to be tired and were too old to work. But think about it today. Now retirement has turned into this season of life where really we just have an endless vacation where we lose track of our time and our schedule and our guardrails and our identity. And hear me, we lose track of our purpose. Retirement is a huge life change. Two of the most dangerous years of your life are, number one, the year that you were born physically, and number two, the year that you retire, but not physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, mentally. So you have to be ready for retirement and not just financially. In fact, we would argue that being ready financially lots of times is the easy part. It's really just kind of a mathematical equation executed over time. And I'm certainly not diminishing the work that retirement planners do. Having a solid retirement plan is vital for a retiree. But the more difficult battle goes on inside of the retiree, in their heart and in their mind. So if you're new to the show, welcome. We speak a different language here regarding retirement. A different narrative is what we try to bring to the table. So I hope that you are ready. Well, after decades of working and adding value, many retirees wrestle with this question, have I done enough? High achievers that are used to producing can have a hard time slowing down in retirement. So how much is enough, and when can you give yourself a reason to actually rest in retirement? Ben Taatjes not only answers these questions, but gives distinctions between a healthy drive for success and an unhealthy relationship with work. Enjoy this episode. All right, folks, welcome back. We are continuing this series on answering life's most difficult questions. We're so glad that you are joining us here today. We were actually going to stop this little mini-series last week, but we figured there was another show because there's another really important question that deserves an answer once you are retired. So we're so glad that you are joining us here today. Just a quick reminder, we have a Facebook group just for you. It is called Becoming Repurposed in Retirement. Join a growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. All the content, all the latest and greatest links, everything we talk about on the show, if we talk about it and you want to connect with it and you want to find maybe more resources of studies or charts or links that we talk about here on the show, that is a great place to find it. And of course, all the webinars, latest and greatest stuff coming out of our platform. The Facebook group is a great place to find that. Go to facebook.com and search Becoming Repurposed in Retirement to join this growing community of people that refuse to accept the typical American dream retirement. Ben Taatjes joins me on the show here today, and now we have spent a couple of shows talking about some of these difficult questions, and these have been some pretty deep shows. I think we've gone pretty deep into the essence of really what our life is supposed to not only just look like, but look like in retirement. And I think that these are really important shows that discuss some probably some topics that aren't always talked about in the conversation of retirement.
No, these are questions that I think get really hard to answer for retirees. I think that's what I'm finding is that the question of who am I, that's a question of identity. And if you've had your identity as put it in the wrong place, which is in your work, and there's an element of who we are that I think comes to in what we do. But so many times we hear that question of who am I get answered in what I do, and that's not it. So I think that's the first one we covered, and then where do I belong and what am I supposed to do? Both of those questions get more difficult in retirement, because you walk away from a group of people that you've been working with, and your kind of community at work kind of disappears.
Yeah.
And then, what am I supposed to do? Your purpose. This can be really hard to find in retirement. So those first three questions, man, I tell you, those are the big ones, and the one today too. I think people just retirement's not as easy as people think it is, because people just say, just go off and be retired, and it should be easy because you don't have to work, and
Right.
it's not that easy.
Yeah, I think there's this misnomer of, as soon as I just remove work out of the life equation, everything is going to just fall into an alignment perfectly and seamlessly, and everything is great from here on out. So again, we're trying to create as few missteps as possible for you folks listening. One thing that I took away from the past couple of shows, first of all, those questions, you're, as just part of the human experience, are being answered all the time. My kids are pretty young. I've got a 12-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 8-year-old, and they're trying to figure out the answers to those questions. They're trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? What's my thing? Where do I belong? Where's my identity? Of course, it doesn't come out that way. They're not articulating that because they're kids, but those questions certainly need an answer at any age. And then the second huge takeaway for me last week was, just think about it. Your job helps you answer a lot of these questions for a large chunk of your life. Again, we could have a philosophical discussion over how much of your identity should be in work and how much of our self-worth comes from our job. But the truth is your job does give you a form of identity. It does give you, again, something to do. It does give you a place to belong. And then, bam, as soon as you retire, those three answers to those three very important questions go away in an instant. And if you're not prepared for it, it can kind of leave you wondering.
Yeah, Jared, I think you've got to just make sure that you've replaced the things that work gave you with something, right? So we often talk with new retirees about retiring to something, not just from something. Don't just get away from work.
Right.
You have to get into something new, and that doesn't mean immediately. I like this idea of rest for a retiree, like a Sabbath, like a time where they really go through the steps to decide what is next.
Yeah.
But if you're not actively trying to decipher God's will, and you're not listening and trying to decide where can I be used in His kingdom, where can I be used to continue to add value in my community, I think that's when you will find out that retirement will let you down.
In a perfect scenario, you have these questions answered for the next phase before you retire. Many times you just don't know. You just don't know exactly kind of what that next phase will bring. Bottom line, it should be on your radar. So hopefully, again, if you're listening to this, just retired, approaching retirement, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, whatever the case, these questions need to be on your radar, and you need to be aware just how drastically the answers to those questions are going to change.
Yeah, I think you just have to do some soul searching,
Yeah.
Jared, and you and I, I've walked with a lot of retirees through this. I've seen the pitfalls, and these questions that we're talking about are questions that I hear retirees ask me. Who am I right now?
Right.
I feel like I'm lost. I get that a lot, and I found some identity in work, and then we kind of start to relearn or unlearn how they felt about themselves and get them into a better spot. But so many times that becomes the question, and I think if you've had a job that you had a lot of passion towards, and there was a purpose there, like it wasn't just a 9-to-5 job, job, but it was a career that you were deep into and you loved your work, but you felt like it was time to move on. That sometimes can be the hardest ones. I think the easiest ones, Jared, are the ones that they all of a sudden get pulled in all these new directions, and all of a sudden their volunteer requirements, and they're starting up another entity, or they're doing something different. They know it's time to move on.
Right.
Those are the easy ones because they've again retired to something, not just from something.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you missed the last couple of shows, go check them out. Again, we've answered the questions: who am I? Where do I belong? What am I supposed to do? Though we've covered those three major questions in the last 2 episodes. So go back on your favorite podcasting platform, find us, subscribe, go check out those shows, because these are all really important questions that demand an answer. So on today's show, we are going to continue this conversation and have yet another really important question. And this question today that we're going to cover is, have I done done enough? Ben, where do we even start with trying to dissect this?
Well, I start with kind of where I came up with the idea for this show, and that's kind of in my own life, Jared. I deal with a lot of really successful people, and I think we're fairly successful here, and the success has grown. And I've tried to vacation recently, and man, I tell you, there's a little bit of that feeling of I'm not certainly feeling as if I'm retiring, but the feeling I had was like, is this what some retirees feel like? Like you take an extended break and you rest, and it's like, oh man, I feel like I should be at the office. I feel like I should be doing something. I feel like I should be trying to achieve something today. Yeah. I've had this conversation so many times, but I think it's a question that a retiree has to be feeling nearing retirement is, have I done enough? Have I achieved enough? If you're a high achiever, have I, worked hard enough? It's more this person that's not as worried about financial, like, do I have enough?
Right.
It's have I done enough?
Yeah, I want to dig into your experience with that. I've got some questions I want to ask you and hear your opinion on that. But I would tend to agree with that. Like, I'm kind of like you. I don't rest well. And if you don't believe me, ask my wife. We try to just kind of take one day a weekend and just kind of shut it all off. And I look forward to that day. But I got to say, by the end of that day, I'm kind of ready to rumble a little bit. I go for a walk every morning, and usually on that walk, I just have some alone time, think a little bit, pray, meditate, whatever. And usually by the end of that walk, it takes about 35 minutes, I've usually busted out my calendar for that day. And I feel like that's a good time to do that after I've kind of reset my thoughts a little bit, kind of got, on the straight and narrow. But then I look at my calendar and I want to see my calendar like plugged up. I like that. I don't like going into a day where I don't have some tasks that I'm ready to knock off the list and get after it and achieve something. So I can connect with you on that one.
Yeah, and I think, am I a workaholic?
That's maybe one of your questions.
Yeah, can a workaholic retire?
Right.
I think, Jared, I don't think I'm a workaholic. I don't think I think workaholics tend to put, they put that work above and put it in place of, God. They put it in front of their family. It starts to cause major relational issues. Yeah. I don't have that. But what I have is this desire to achieve and this desire to do more and to help more people. Yeah. The other day, my daughter had texted me, and she had texted me something, hey, I want to go, and she's a CNA right now. She's a 17-year-old coming into her senior year. And she's like, hey, can I work this one night? And I'm like, man, why do you keep working? And she's like, I've learned it from you. And I'm like, oof, is this good? Is this bad? Right. But I think at the end of the day, achievement and work is so important to us, whether or not we're in our career and we're working, or if we're retired. It makes no difference. God made us that way. That's right. In fact, I think that's a big problem in society today. When we see programs, government programs, that there's so much handout and there's so much here, just take. And you don't combine that with a level of work and achievement, that is going against the very grain of how God made us. Yeah. And when we move into retirement, if all we're doing, Jared, is we're just we're taking, hey, we've put money in Social Security to take our income, we've saved enough, now we don't have to do anything. Yeah. I think that goes against how we were created. We were made in God's image, right? God made us to look and somewhat be like Him. Okay, we're not gods, but there's part of Him in each of us. We're His children. So when we lose that work and that achievement, I think that can be a problem.
I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and during the conference they were kind of asking us to soul search a little bit and think about what drives you. Why do you want to be successful in your business? And it was specifically for people in the financial industry. And the gentleman that was leading it, he's like, maybe it's because you wanna make more money. And he's like, and I feel like we've had to apologize for that. Like, I think in some regards in the Christian camp, sometimes we look at the drive to succeed and achieve as kind of a bad thing. And certainly biblical pride is bad, but he talked about ego. He's like, sometimes like ego is a thing. It can be a very positive thing. And he's like, at the end of the day, if you want to be successful because you want to prove it to yourself, What's wrong with that? I've been working out lately with my 12-year-old son, and I see him really going after it. And the gym is the ultimate, it's the ultimate you against self, because I can't lift the weights for you. And we all know people that can go to the gym every day for hours and literally do nothing. You know what I mean? Like, you have to go in there and prove it to yourself. And I'm watching him, pick up on that and feel the excitement of being able to lift more weight. And I think that's, again, I don't know if ego is the right word, but this drive to succeed, I don't think is a bad thing. I think it's a very good thing. And a lot of times God puts that in us. You started to answer the question, but I'd like to hear your opinion on this. Where's the line? Where is the drive for success and achievement and that inability to rest? Where does it kind of enter that gray area where it may be a little quote unquote unhealthy?
Yeah, well, from a work standpoint, like I said, when a workaholic person begins to have that disconnect with their family, disconnect with their relationship with God, they start to prioritize work over all else. I think that's when you have it. But I think from a success standpoint, Jared, the problem with success, and we know this, is that the goalpost moves, right? So you might think you've achieved something, and I want the next thing. Yeah. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about healthy, good work, not necessarily because I need the bigger home or the second home, the third home, the faster car, the whatever it is. I think that's what's at stake here. I think when you go too far and you start to prioritize those things above people, that's an issue. But we're talking about just healthy. I love my job because I help people, and I'm able to help more people and do more. Now, is there some financial reward to that? Yes, and but it's not for that. It's for the people that you're helping. So I think the line becomes when you start to idolize, you start to put something before God, and it shows up in your life. Yeah,
I was going to actually bring that up. Do you feel that work and success can lots of times be an idol? Of course, I think you would answer that yes, and that's exactly what an idol is. It's something that you put before your relationship with the Lord and above your family. Then it becomes this idol, and I think that's probably where the line is, and your heart aspect. And I think you nailed it too, where you said the drive to succeed isn't necessarily for the result being money and currency. It's for the value add and the helping fellow man. That's the drive.
Yeah, and you don't want to get to the end of your life and have the regrets of that you've worked too much either, right? I mean, that's something that I think, in Ecclesiastes, it talks about that. Ecclesiastes 2:17 talks about how the writer hated life because work was meaningless. Everything was worthless. He hated it because, he was leaving something after for who was after him. But yet, when you look at that verse and you look at how it looked like everything was meaningless, everything that they had toiled for under the sun was meaningless. I think we have to look inside and say, I've worked too hard to achieve something. It wasn't the work that was bad. It was the result of the work and all the things that really caused the problem. So I think we have to realize that God made us to achieve. He made us to work. But he also, Jared, made us to rest, right?
Yeah. And I think that's the second piece to this, and I do want to talk about this. Whenever you talk about working too much, and you brought up that verse in Ecclesiastes, I always bring up the Brony Ware book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And again, this is a lady who spent time working in basically hospice in Australia, and she wrote a book about all the people that she had conversations with before they passed. The number one regret amongst the dying was they were not true to themselves. They wish they had lived a life more true to themselves, not what society or friends or their community thought they should have been. More truthful living. That's another podcast. But the second one was, and it always happened with guys, they said that they regretted working so much. Again, we're contradicting ourselves here. We're saying in one cheek, on one side of the mouth, hey, you know what? Achievement's good, work is good. And then on the other side, we're saying you can get to the end of your life and feel like you worked too hard. So again, I think it's a very delicate balancing act, always making sure that you're doing a little bit of, soul analysis to make sure that your heart and your head's in the right spot as you achieve and why you're doing it.
Yeah, and then make sure you rest too. I think there's an element of that last week on vacation, I kept kind of struggling with this. I'd get up in the morning, I'd be like, oh man, I'm gonna stain the entire deck today. I would just start going crazy, and my wife looks at me and says, we're on vacation. I'm like, for me, some of this achievement thing is it gives me
energy.
It gives me energy.
Yeah.
It actually creates that feeling of, hey, I've got something done, and makes my afternoon a little bit better. Now, that's not a negative thing. That's something that God made me with that maybe a little heightened level of wanting to achieve. But I think I just have to be careful. I have to be careful that I didn't then prioritize, I got to get all this stuff done before my family. I didn't prioritize putting that stuff as, again, an idol before God. I had to be careful of that. And I have to continue to be careful of that. And then, of course, make sure I'm resting at some point.
That's a really good point. We've got about 5 minutes left of the show. I want to ask you this, and I don't want to hesitate asking it, but it's going to be a tough question. I'm putting you on the spot here, but to answer this question, have I done enough? How does a retiree know? How does a high achiever who's transitioning, out of a business, out of being in a CEO position, transition into that period of life where, again, it's just going to look different now as they're entering this particular phase? How does one know and have peace that they have indeed done enough?
Jeremy, it's a huge question. Thanks for putting me on the spot, by the way. But I think I don't know that we've ever done enough. I mean, when we look at who we are in Christ, God didn't say when we get to a certain age you can just be done adding value. You can be done, creating. You can. So I think the question I'm kind of thinking through is in this company, when will I be able to walk away and say, okay, that's good. I'm going to do something else. And I think my answer is going to look like I've got a certain goal we're trying to accomplish here as a business. I'm trying to create something that continues to grow even without me. And when I get to the point that this business is working without me, in fact, better almost than when I'm here, and I can see the value in people's lives coming, both the people that work here and the clients, and we're helping a lot of people, and yet I'm not needed here. And then I get pulled into another direction. That's probably when I say that it's enough. And I think there will be periods of rest throughout here, hopefully. But I think for somebody just to say, I've done enough, and know 100% that was the right decision, you're never going to know 100%. But if you can walk away and feel as if you've accomplished the mission, right, of whatever you're walking away from, I think that's a key component.
Yeah, even if you go back to the creation part of Genesis, it talks about how God created for 6 days and He rested. It didn't say that He was now done and that was it and it's game over. No, God continues to move and live and be involved. So I think that, to your point, it kind of mimics even the creation story where there was creation, there was value, rest, but that wasn't over. It just may have looked slightly different, but the value and the work did continue.
Yeah, I mean, you read that verse. I mean, Genesis 2, verse 2. By the seventh day, God had finished the work He had been doing. So on the seventh day, He rested from all His work, and God blessed the seventh day, made it holy, because on it He rested from all the work of creating that He had done. Right. It didn't say now He's done forever. He's taking a break. It's a rest. Yeah. And I think part of that too, it doesn't say anything about He had to rest because He was tired. I don't think that's necessarily why people need to move on or feel as if they've done enough in a job. It's not because you're done, because you're just tired. Many times it's the time to do it. And the other thing I love about that verse and that scripture is that He looked on what He had done. And it was good.
Sure.
I think, it's like, hey, even God could appreciate the beauty of what He had done. And I think, you look around our world, and what God created is beautiful, right? And I think man's messed a lot of that up, and certainly the fall, we continue to make mistakes. We all do, but what God did is beautiful.
Yeah, I think that this message is really, it's kind of like salve to the heart of somebody who is a high achiever, knows it's probably time, air quotes, time to step away from a current role, but a little uneasy knowing that they're going to walk into a period where now I'm kind of peer pressured or society pressured into being a little bit more dormant or inactive than I want to be. I think that this is a good message for them to say, you know what, it doesn't have to be. You can move on, you can have more rest, but you can still kind of scratch that itch that God gave you in your personality and your heart.
Yeah, I mean, you're not done achieving. Yeah, I think that's important that somebody hears that. You're not done working. God isn't done with your work. He may be calling you into something else. And if you're feeling that pull into something else, you may not even know what that is, but knowing that you're not supposed to stay in your current role, whether you're a CEO that's leaving, I'm working with a CEO right now, it's kind of like, I think it's time. A person selling a business, that same type of a deal. I mean, those people need to hear and understand that God is not done with you yet. In fact, the greatest work could just be beginning right now.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you'd like a copy of Ben's book, Repurpose, The Untold Story of Retirement in America, just go to our website, retirerepurposed.com. Until next time, I'm Jared Sebesta. Remember, don't retire, become repurposed. We'll see you then.
Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services. Member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through an Avantax affiliated insurance agency.